Hey guys, and welcome back to Martin's Daughter. I just returned from a trip to Washington, D.C., where I was supposed to advocate for charter schools. And what I found there was extremely eye opening. Um, First off, DC is amazing. I highly recommend that everyone go at some point in their life. I had no idea I even wanted to go until I was there and just experienced it. Just experienced so many memorials for so many people who have paid a great tribute to our country with their lives. And it was eye-opening and a little bit confusing to be there, to see that not all charter schools are created equally, and as Americans we're not all fighting for the same thing. I mean, I knew there was the left and the right, but I didn't realize that there were people who still supported the idea of segregation. So that's what I want to talk about today. um to be honest, I'm not okay. It was a really rough trip to go somewhere and to think that I'm standing up for school choice and the values of my school that put patriotism and American greatness and responsibility at the forefront and academics at the forefront. And instead to find that there are schools that their main focus is social justice, or their main focus is being segregated. Black schools, Black students, Black teachers matter, on the t-shirts of many of the people who were there. And I did ask for clarification. I said, I'm just wondering, if somebody lived in your community that wasn't Black, could they come to your school? And I was told no, they would not be welcome. I found that shocking because, well, I don't believe in that. I believe in this concept that everyone should be seen by what they contribute, what they bring to the table, and their great potential. And I do believe that everyone has great potential. Even the people way, way over here in what I would call like Looney Tune land, and the people way, way over here in what I would definitely call Looney Tune land, even though that they're these two extreme sides. I believe that people have potential, and when they know truth, that they can be better for it. One of the most shocking things to me was to leave our hotel and go to a rally and have 6-year-olds, just very young children, with their fists up in the air because they're used to it, because they're used to protesting at the age of 6 years old. That's sad to me because children, they don't need to do that. They truly, truly don't care until they're taught to. And sadly, what we're going to see is more and more children being taught to through SEL, social and emotional learning with a transformative lens, and through diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. The cognitive dissonance it takes to justify bringing these programs into our schools, it is mind-blowing. And sometimes I'm not okay. I'm just like, the fight is so intense and never ending that it makes you just go, what's the point? Can we ever win? Hold on to that, because eventually I'll get back and I'll give you some hope. Our state recently appointed an ethnic studies commission. Appointed meaning they are not voted in, meaning that they are above suspicion. Whatever they want, they will get. And one of the leaders on this committee recently put out this: when I see or hear things that are dangerous, offensive, or downright based in fear, I speak up, I educate, and sometimes I unfollow the account on social media. So let me start with my first problem with this person. Who gets to determine what is dangerous? Why is it offensive or dangerous to have an opinion that differs from another person? If it's just your opinion, it's just your thoughts. You are not doing actions, you are not calling for violence. You simply have a different way of seeing things. Why is that dangerous? And quite frankly, who has called it dangerous in the past? The people who have said that we need to control thoughts in the past have not been on the right side of history. So then the person goes on to say, if the people you follow are constantly bashing a group of other people, you might want to question their motives and ask why. Doesn't that sound like fear bullying, hatred, or an agenda? So again, let me look at this. Bullying, shutting people down and canceling them for having a different viewpoint than you. To me, that seems like the definition of bullying, especially when it goes as far as to calling people's place of work and demanding that they not work because they're a racist. The next thing this person says, who adamantly claims that there is no critical race theory being taught in K through 12 schools, last time I checked, critical race theorists hadn't gone around and killed people. Well, guess what? Mao studied critical theory, and Mao has got around and killed millions of people, as has Stalin. This idea that demanding groupthink in order to keep people safe led to horrendous crimes against humanity on countless occasions already. Just, it blows my mind that somebody would bring up such a lame argument, because yes, as She Van Fleet said, and as others have said, there is no room for dissent. The next part says, it's voting season. Listen closely to people running for office. This is America for all, right? It's time we started acting like it. Watch the candidates. If they are about replacement or victimhood or banning books, they aren't the candidate for the people. So replacement. Well, replacement looks like curriculum like FAIR. Quite frankly, I would much rather Bob Woodson's programs of 1776 history be, but it's rather that because Woodson walked with Martin Luther King, he's walked in the shoes that I find myself having to walk in now, which is that of the dissident African American, the offending voice, because we dared to go, my humanity matters so much more than my race. We dared to say, nobody gets to push me down and keep me there. I'm going to rise. And I don't even know, perhaps Woodson would be more of a tribalist, more of a segregationist than I am, because I'm not one at all. But I like a curriculum that teaches that slavery happened and that it was awful and that no one should have had to ever experience it, and the stories of overcoming and the stories of great achievement, and that happened in America. I think a lot of people take for granted. A lot of people think, oh, America is the only racist country. Well, America is one of the only countries that has such a great amount of diversity. A lot of other countries tend to be monolithic. They also tend to require allegiance to their countries. America is the only place that you can be so free that you can spout hatred, not be arrested for it. In a recent video I did with Laverna in the library, we talked about the whole burning books or banning books. We don't want to do either. What we want is books that specifically talk about sexual acts, including breaking into the teacher's room and having sex on her desk, including gay and lesbian sex, including straight sex, including trafficked people sex. We don't want those in middle schools. If you want to have that book read to your child, and you feel like it's just so important to their understanding of the world, we suggest going to the library. Go to your public library. Nobody's standing outside the library going, we don't want these books in our libraries. We're saying we don't want them in school libraries, where we should be holding people to a higher standard. And that gets tricky, because then, do people want to say, well, there are people who want to get rid of Huck Finn. There are people who want to get rid of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I'm not one of those people. I think classical literature is great. I think grooming children under the name of diversity, equity, inclusion is a real problem, and creating children that are othered, that are questioning their sexuality before they're old enough to care about their sexuality is also a real problem. So the last thing that this person says is that take the time to look at candidates and skip the party lines, vote responsibly. Her life depends on it. Where I take the most issue, and why this has frustrated me to the point of coming home, taking a mental health day, planning and getting under my covers and bawling my eyes out, and instead turning on my computer and talking to you, is that it should be so clear at this point that what the goal is to rely on white guilt to change society. And my argument here is that if you really do believe that you're a racist, I don't want you teaching my kid. I don't want you anywhere near government authority. If you really are the racist, please don't even vote. But the thing is that there's many of us who are being bullied, as she herself put it. And that's what this does. This says you need to show that you are supportive of all of America by voting for the person I want you to vote for. And also, my life depends on it, is what she says. This woman works in schools, and not once does she point out our children depend on it. What do our children need? I have been listening and watching, and right now we're going through something where they're showing the new curriculums, the new social and emotional learning curriculums for our schools. And I'm watching it, and the focus is constantly our children's mental health. My argument is that someone manufactured a mental health crisis. And a lot of children, my own included, as soon as they were able to be free, as soon as they were able to leave a state that had lots of restrictions and be in a state that had very few, their mental health improved greatly. As soon as the conversations about fear changed in schools to conversations about academics, just conversations about great classic books, their mental health improved greatly. As soon as we were able to bring back the arts, as soon as we were able to have performances and have people come and cheer for them and praise their accomplishments, their mental health improved greatly. So why then does our focus moving forward need to be mental health, social justice, and climate change? If an individual cares about those things, then they should be pushed into a direction that helps them foster that care. But to push everyone and make everybody say that these are the main important things, and no, your academics aren't so important, as the NEA recently said, who cares if our children know how to read or write? They know what an insurrection is. Do you get it? Watch Becky Pringle. Watch the NEA. Listen to the way the woman talks. So for her to assume or just to take on that everybody believes the same way that she does doesn't seem like a legitimate educator to me, because a legitimate educator should be encouraging people to think rather than telling them what they must think. Going back to the post that I was reading, this woman calls it harm. We can't call thinking differently harm. We can call demanding that other people obey what we want harm. But we can't call just the idea of having different thoughts, of going, I'm not so sure about that, I want to ask questions. We cannot call that harm. We cannot attack those people who believe differently than us. We can, by far, and I highly endorse attacking the ideas, going to the nitty gritty of the ideas and saying what does work here, what doesn't work here, and if it doesn't work, it needs to go. We should absolutely do that. But we shouldn't be erasing people, because then we are going to become just as bad as those that we point our fingers at. We're going to become the monsters that we think that we're fighting. I don't want to become that. So let me tell you some of the highlights of DC. After going to a rally where people flat out said they don't want white people in their schools, after going to a rally where people were encouraged to shout and spell equity incorrectly, by the way, I felt disgusting. I felt just completely distraught. So after the rally, I went back to my hotel room, and I was really, and also I was grateful because I was just very happy that I was not one of the people selected to speak, because I'm sure that the things that I would have said would have put a target on me. All I know is I was grateful that the message that I have, I felt protected at that moment, which is extremely sad because, as you know, watching my channel, that the message that I have is always about being better, always about unification, always about what I believe truly to be right. So a friend asked me why we didn't push back harder, or why specifically I didn't push back harder. And I had to think about that because she was just like, if you won't push back, then who will? And I thought, it's not that I won't push back, it's that I'm selective about what I'll push back on. To me, the thing that I push back on more than anything is the idea of tribalism, the idea of teaching our kids to think about things through a lens of criticism rather than to think critically. Two very extremely different things. Thinking critically means finding proof. Thinking through a lens of criticism means finding reasons to be resentful. So when we get there, they tell us all of these rules. One of the rules was that out of the 1,000 of us at the event, only 200 of us could go to the Department of Education and voice our concerns. And all that meant was say a bunch of rally chants and leave. We weren't supposed to block the sidewalks. We were expected to be obedient. If we weren't obedient, we would be removed immediately. And I found that quite hypocritical and also all about optics because there were 800 people back at the hotel. I found a little bit of joy on those little scooters that you get on, and they're battery powered and you go all over the district. So I did that and it was amazing and heart-wrenching and powerful because I was able to go and see all of the memorials. And the one that touched me the most, it was powerful to see Martin Luther King and to step right where he was and to speak his words. I literally pulled up his I Have a Dream speech and I read it to a group of people standing on his stairs. And I don't know if that was like, I didn't mean it as a mockery, I meant it as a tribute. So hopefully that's how it came across. The most powerful thing I saw, though, was a Vietnam memorial of 3 soldiers. One is obviously white, one is obviously black, and one is probably Asian, perhaps Hispanic, standing together. And just this example that when it comes down to what matters most, you're more concerned about whether or not you can trust a human being than you are the color of their skin or the socioeconomic bracket that they belong to. It's more about the brotherhood of man. I just sat and I looked at that memorial for a long time and I read the names of all of those people for, I don't know, probably 40 minutes, just going down and reading all of those names of those people who were sent off to do something that they probably didn't want to do and who learned true unity comes in the midst of battle. So to hear these people, usually people making a profit, to hear these people say that America has never tried to right its wrongs, I just feel like that is very dismissive of the people who fought in the Civil War because they thought that slavery was wrong. And no, I'm not saying that that's what the Civil War was all about, but I'm saying that there were people who lost their relationships with their families to stand up for what they believed was right. I'm saying that there were people who also had the milkshakes poured on them because they sat in the diner where Black people were being persecuted and they acted as human shields because they believed that they were doing is right. There have always been people who have stood for what was right. And to dismiss them and to say that America has never done anything so that you can get an $8,000 paycheck to still find racism, which sometimes you don't even, to do that and then to impose that on our kids. Again, and I know I say this in many videos, but our kids do not care until they're taught to. But now it makes people stop and think, oh gosh, is this going to be a problem? And that's a horrific way to expect kids to live. And the other thing that I find just extremely upsetting is that these are educators. And educators are supposed to be this great light of hope. They are supposed to be the ones who inspire kids to be better human beings. And instead, it seems to me like they're using our children. The SEL programs, the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, they don't have a goal of true equity, because true equity would mean that everybody is living in the same type of house, in the same type of neighborhood, and nobody's running out of water. We've got everything that we need, and we're all equal. And that's not the way that it happens. If you look at the diversity, equity, and inclusion people, you realize that they are making bank. This is a grift. You look at BLM, look at the money that they have made, look at the people that they have paid for their services. It's a grift. Look at the white people who adopt Black children and then write books about it, or have Instagram channels that are sponsoring their t-shirts or whatever. It's a grift. And these grifts are destroying the opportunities for our kids. When you go to DC, you see the Constitution. When you go to DC, you see all of these monuments. When you go to DC, it's packed with history, and not all of it's beautiful. And they need to be kept because they remind us that we could always go right back there. We realize that humans are extremely fallible, and there's nothing wrong. In fact, we do need to know those stories, because when we know those stories, then we have a chance of not repeating the same thing. When we highlight the narrative of oppression when it's not the actual truth, when it's not actually true that what we're living today is not the same as what they lived in the 60s, not at all the same as what slavery was. When we highlight the narrative that it somehow is, that we've never been any better, we're lying. We're lying to ourselves. We're lying to our children. And I think that ultimately the only hope that we have in this whole mess, when we're looking at bringing in more mental health to our children who only need to be allowed the same experiences that we were allowed. They only need to be allowed to be free and to not have to constantly be asked, are you anxious? Are you depressed? Are you this? Are you that? And instead, just let them be and let them come to us and say if this is how they feel, instead of constantly asking them these questions. We need to stop feeding the worst of humanity. And instead, we need to take a look and go, it's pretty good. There's some pretty good things here. We're pretty lucky to live in a country that allows us to think differently, that allows us to make choices for our own lives, that it allows us the freedom to just be. And then with that, we need to take what knowledge that we have and inspire people to be their best, especially our kids. Thanks.